which can total into millions of dollars, and the state would ultimately bear those costs. This also comes at a time when FEMA is urging states to take a more pro in disaster response and recovery operations, as their ability to continue to provide resources outside of financial reimbursement increasing scale and magnitude of disasters facing the nation. Additionally, what happens if the legislature is not in session for an extended period of time, or the magnitude of the disaster inhibits the ability of the legislature to meet virtually or in person to draft a joint resolution or continue a disaster declaration? These are all plausible scenarios, and we should not be left to find out the impacts, or more likely when they occur. The bottom line is that voters are being led to believe that voting yes to these amendments is in their best interest and will prevent or significantly time limit any orders that are perceived as overly restrictive in response to future pandemics or other disasters. This is just not factual, and the voters deserve to hear the full story so they can make an informed decision when they go to the polls on May 18th. The law as it stands currently allows for a balance of legislative power. These amendments would significantly disrupt that balance at the potential detriment of those most affected by future disasters and interject politics further into a process that should be removed as possible from partisan politics for the benefit of all citizens of the Commonwealth. Now, at this point, I'd like to turn the podium over to Kevin Malloy to provide some comments from his perspective.
Thank you, Director Patfield. Good afternoon. My name is Kevin J. Malloy. I appreciate the opportunity to provide comments on the two proposed amendments that are going to be appearing on the ballot this month, the ones that relate to emergency management that the Director was just referring to. I bring to this conversation some 50 years of emergency management experience. I served as the Dauphin County, Pennsylvania Emergency Management Coordinator for some 10 years, being hands-on involved with dealing with different kinds of disasters, and of course, one of the most infamous being the 3 Mile Island event. I worked for the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency for several years, both with Central Area and also here at headquarters. During that time, I was out in the field assisting county and local people during disasters and doing after action reports, disaster surveys, and so forth. And finally, following the September 11th attack, I went to work for FEMA, initially working with Centers for Disease Control on bioterrorism and events such as that. I've taught and trained emergency management personnel not only around the country and at the National Emergency Training Center, but also around the world, serving as a liaison for the Central Command in the Middle East in such countries as Qatar, Kuwait, various places. I've also trained emergency management people in Africa and South America. So I bring a little bit of experience to this conversation from my perspective. I can state with certainty that disasters and emergencies have never, ever followed any plan that I have written or helped to write, or that anybody's ever written. And as a result of that, I clearly understand that we need a few things to respond effectively to disasters. We need flexibility, we need the ability to adapt, and we need an uninterrupted response. The responses to disasters, whether large or small, in many cases are similar. Similar activities take place. But every once in a while, such as we're dealing with the COVID situation now, or back to 3 Mile Island, it requires the ability to adapt to changing times. And they, as we all know, are changing rapidly. Do we need a mask? Don't we need a mask? Do we need a shot? That sort of thing. Based on what is going on, an emergency manager has to have the ability to not be concerned with being stopped after a certain period of time when dealing with a disaster situation. Having a law in place which allows for disaster declaration is imperative. It's not only true here at the state level, but also at county and local levels. A disaster declaration allows for those who are hands-on individuals to respond quickly and in a coordinated fashion. And interestingly enough, when we have a snowstorm, your local people institute emergency plans and procedures, and it's done under local laws and legislation, if you will. And what that does is that affords them the ability to go out and bypass certain purchasing requirements, bring in extra resources, and that type of thing. Emergency declarations, as the director said, allow for the activation of various mutual aid agreements. They allow, in some cases, for certain procedures, such as normal purchasing requirements, can be suspended. The declaration of an emergency is one of the most important tools in an emergency manager's toolbox. An emergency declaration is also a requirement to access federal resources, not only federal dollars, but federal resources. And it allows both the state and local governments ultimately to benefit with federal funding, depending upon what has been authorized by the government and so forth. One of the basic building blocks of the National Incident Management System, or NIMS, is the use of what we call the Incident Command System. The foundation for ICS dictates there will be one incident commander while others do the actual response. From a 30,000-foot level, if you will, the governor is the overall incident commander from my perspective. Title 35 has, for the past 30 plus years, provided a clear role for the executive authority of the governor as it relates to the state emergency declaration process. If these two amendments are allowed, and all of a sudden we have discussion going on in the legislature, I just cannot envision any benefit to having 200 legislators being assistant incident commanders, if you will. Too many chefs, so to speak. The current law in Pennsylvania, in my professional opinion, is more than adequate to provide the foundation upon which response is based. Change, in my opinion, is unnecessary and unwise. You don't change horses in the middle of a stream. Every time you have a disaster, large or small, there are after-action reports. There are hearings, and you testify before tons of committees. I have done that. But based on that procedure, that's when you're in a position that you can intelligently look at the necessity of change to laws, to the way programs are enacted or administered. You can't call a timeout at the end of 21 days to have a political discussion. The disruption to disaster response has the potential to be catastrophic, which could impact everybody in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Based on that, I would urge that Pennsylvanians vote a resounding no to changing existing emergency management laws. And if it's going to be done, wait till after the disaster's over and the response is over, and do it in an intelligent fashion. I thank you for your time, and thank Director Padfield for his time.